SingleDad opened the door at 2 a.m. and froze when he saw who she was. The floor buffer hummed. Jack Mercer guided it across the tiled lobby, eyes half closed. It was nearly 2 a.m. The only sound came from the hum of the machine and the occasional creak of the old building settling into its bones. Outside, the world was asleep. Inside, Jack was counting down the minutes until he could see Lily. She'd be fast asleep in her twin bed, probably curled up with that stuffed rabbit she named Pancake. He smiled just thinking about her. She was the reason he'd taken this job, the reason he kept going after losing Claire. The janitor cart clicked as he rolled it back into the closet, and Jack pulled on his worn hoodie. The air was cold tonight, and the walk home would be long. Still, it was peaceful. The city after midnight had a kind of honesty to it. At 1:58 a.m., he climbed the old stairs of their apartment building. Third floor, Unit 3C. The lock always stuck, and the hallway light flickered overhead like it couldn't decide whether to give up. Jack opened the door, dropped his key on the counter, and tiptoed into Lily's room. She was asleep, her hair a messy halo on the pillow. Jack knelt beside her and whispered, "Nightbug." Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft raps. Jack turned confused. No one knocked at 2 a.m., not here. He opened the door and froze. There, drenched in rain and shaking, stood Sophie Delacroix, except he knew her as Sophie Daniels, the girl who'd once lived down the street, the girl who shared peanut butter sandwiches with him when they were kids, the girl who disappeared 10 years ago without a goodbye. Now she looked different, the same sea glass eyes, but older, worn, terrified. "Sophie," he said barely above a whisper. She opened her mouth like she might speak, but nothing came. Then she whispered, "Can I come in?" Jack stepped aside. Sophie didn't speak for several minutes. Jack handed her a towel. She stood by the kitchen radiator dripping and silent. He made tea without asking. She used to love peppermint. When he finally handed her the cup, she clutched it like it was the only warm thing in her world. "Where have you been?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Not now, Sophie, your face is everywhere." "I know. You're the missing woman on every news channel." "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. Jack stared at her. The girl from the swing set, the one who kissed him behind the movie theater the night before she left. Now she was back soaked and trembling in his kitchen. She looked up, finally meeting his gaze. "I wasn't running," Jack didn't answer, but he didn't ask her to leave either. And that was enough for now. The morning light slipped through the blinds as Jack flipped on the TV, expecting weather noise, something ordinary. Instead, her face filled the screen. Eleanor Delacroix still missing after vanishing from her family's charity gala. Jack's breath caught. There she was, hair perfectly done, smile polite and distant, the face of headlines and power. The woman sleeping just down the hall. He turned off the sound, but the silence was louder than any news anchor. Sophie stood in the doorway, arms folded, eyes already knowing. "You found out," she whispered. Jack stared at her. "You're her." "I didn't want to be," she said. "Not last night, not here." He looked at the floor, then back at her, not the heiress, not the runaway. Just the girl who once knew his middle name. His worst day, his first heartbreak. Sophie stepped forward, voice low, trembling. "I came to the only place I thought I might still be me." Jack didn't speak, but he didn't ask her to leave either. And somehow, that said everything. The apartment was quiet again. Lily still asleep. The city beginning to stir. Sophie sat at the edge of Jack's old armchair, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't sipped from. Her shoulders were tense like they carried years of silence. Jack didn't push. He just waited. Finally, she spoke. "They wanted me to marry him. Landon, not for love, for leverage. A merger dressed as a wedding." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "They handed me a dress, a schedule, a script, and I was supposed to smile through all of it. Pretend. Obey." Jack's jaw clenched. He remembered that look in her eyes from long ago, the quiet panic she never showed anyone else. I tried to tell them no, she said. They said I was unwell, that I needed rest, that I was embarrassing the family. She looked up at Jack, then the armor slipping just enough. So I ran. I didn't have a plan. I just remembered you. Jack swallowed hard. All I had was your name in my phone and a memory of what safe used to feel like. He didn't say anything at first. Then you're safe here. Her lip trembled. Just once. And for the first time in years, Sophie Delacroix let herself believe it. Jack stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, arms crossed. His apartment wasn't much secondhand furniture, flickering light in the hallway, a couch with a spring that always poked through the side. But it was safe. And somehow that meant everything tonight. Sophie hadn't said much after her confession. She just sat there quiet, small, and real. Jack cleared his throat. You can stay, he said softly. Just the night. Couch is yours. She looked up surprised, not because of what he said, but because of the kindness behind it. She nodded, blinking fast. Thank you, she whispered. He handed her a blanket, not new but warm. She took it like it was gold. You need anything? I'm down the hall, he added. Lily's room's next to mine. Sophie clutched the blanket. She's beautiful. Looks like Claire. Jack smiled just a little. She's got her mother's eyes. A pause, then Sophie spoke almost too softly. Still hard. Every day, Jack said. The clock ticked in the silence. Two people who once shared everything now sat with a decade between them in a couch. Sophie lay down. Jack turned off the light. As he walked away, she whispered, Jack, yeah, thank you for opening the door. His voice was steady but low. I almost didn't. And then he was gone. And she was alone again, but not abandoned. Sophie woke to the smell of something warm and sweet. Pancakes. She blinked at the ceiling for a long moment, unsure if it was real. The couch creaked as she sat up, blanket falling around her shoulders. In the kitchen, Jack stood in sweatpants and a worn t-shirt, flipping pancakes with the ease of routine. His back was to her, and then high. Sophie turned. A little girl with tangled curls and sleepy eyes stood in the hallway holding a stuffed rabbit by the ear. Lily. Sophie froze. Lily didn't. She walked right up, looked at Sophie curiously and asked, Did Daddy save you? Sophie opened her mouth, stunned. Lily leaned in. It's okay. He saves people. He saved me when Mommy went to heaven. Sophie blinked fast. She wasn't ready for this kind of honesty. Jack turned, then noticing them both. Lily, this is an old friend. Miss Sophie. Lily beamed. Want to eat pancakes with us? And just like that, Sophie Harris, runaway ghost of headlines, was pulled into the simple, sacred rhythm of morning. She sat at the small kitchen table, let Lily pour too much syrup on her plate, listened as Jack gently corrected her grammar. She laughed once genuinely. It startled even her. It wasn't a gala. It wasn't a press interview. It wasn't pretend. It was pancakes, and a child, and a man who once knew the real her. And for the first time in years, Sophie felt human again. The pancakes were gone. Lily was in her room humming to herself as she dressed up her stuffed rabbit for a pretend tea party. Jack stood by the window. Sophie noticed the shift in his posture before she asked, What is it? He didn't turn around, just lifted two fingers and pointed down the street. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb. Then another. A man with a camera stepped out, scanning the building. Another figure followed. Then a van marked with a familiar logo, Channel 12 News. Sophie's breath caught. Jack closed the curtain gently, like slamming it would make it worse. They're here, he said. Reporters, paparazzi, maybe more. She stood, heartbeat quickening. How did they find doesn't matter, Jack cut in. They're circling, and this place isn't built for secrets. She looked at him, the man who had given her shelter, silenced pancakes, and now protection. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to drag this into your life. Jack turned to her, then eyes calm but firm. I have a daughter. I can't have this circus outside her door. Sophie nodded, holding back the tears. I'll go, she said. Tonight. He didn't answer, because deep down, neither of them wanted to say what it really meant, that the small, quiet life they'd shared for 2 days was about to vanish. And morning light never felt so heavy. Jack didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table long after Lily went to bed, a half-cold mug in his hand, watching Sophie pace. Her eyes kept darting to the window, to the headlights that passed too slowly, to the shadows that didn't move quite right. They'll find me, she whispered. It's only a matter of time. Jack leaned forward. What if we don't let them? Sophie stopped. There's a place, he continued. My uncle's old cabin, off Route 18 upstate. He passed last year. No one uses it. No neighbors, no cameras, just quiet. Sophie blinked. You take me. You need a place to breathe, Jack said softly. And I need my daughter to wake up without cameras outside her window. She hesitated, torn between fear and something gentler. Hope. Jack pulled out a map, circled the tiny dot near a lake. We leave before sunrise. Pack light. What about your job? She asked. Jack shrugged. Jobs can wait. Lily's safety can't. She looked at him for a long time. The janitor with nothing who had given her everything. A car crept by outside. Headlights off. She nodded. It'll be ready. Before dawn, they slipped into Jack's car, Sophie in the back with Lily blankets pulled high. Lily leaned on Sophie's shoulder, not knowing they were running. Just knowing Sophie smelled like lavender and pancakes. As the city lights faded behind them, so did the noise. And somewhere between silence and pine trees, Sophie exhaled for the first time in years. She wasn't free yet, but she was no longer alone. The cabin was quiet. Lily napped in the loft, curled up with a worn blanket and dreams full of trees. Jack sat on the porch watching the lake shimmer under a pale afternoon sun. It was peaceful, too peaceful for Sophie. She wandered the cabin while Jack stepped outside to take a call. Dust-covered books, old postcards, a faded photo of Jack's uncle in uniform. It was a forgotten place, but it felt lived in. Then in the drawer of a small desk, she found a yellowed envelope. Her name was on it. Not Eleanor, Sophie. She hesitated but unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, messy, but unmistakably Jack's. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you do, I guess it means you came back. Or maybe I never stopped waiting for you to. You disappeared without a word, and part of me hated you for that. But most of me just missed you. I still do. If you ever need a place, this is it. The letter stopped mid-sentence. A blot of ink trailed where his pen must have paused or where he couldn't find the right words. Sophie sat down slowly, letter trembling in her hands. He never sent it, never mentioned it. But he wrote it, he had meant it. Outside, Jack stepped back in surprise to find her holding it. I didn't mean for you to find that, he said quietly. I'm glad I did, she whispered. Their eyes met across the cabin, no headlines, no noise, just unfinished words and the weight of what was never said. And suddenly the lake outside didn't feel so still. It felt full of memory and the start of something new. The fire crackled low in the cabin. Jack sat across from her, one hand wrapped around a chipped mug, the other resting on his knee. Outside, the wind danced through the trees. Inside, Sophie finally let her mask slip. She stared into the flames, voice barely above a whisper. They used to call me the princess of headlines, perfect hair, perfect quotes, perfect life. She laughed once, but it wasn't joy, it was grief. But I was never that girl. I was just the daughter, the brand. My life was press releases and handshakes I never agreed to. They told me when to smile, when to speak, when to fall in love. Jack didn't interrupt. He just listened. Sophie continued, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I started waking up in panic. Couldn't breathe, couldn't eat. They said I was just overwhelmed, that I needed to take vitamins. But it wasn't vitamins I needed. It was space, air, a voice of my own. She turned to him. I disappeared because I was disappearing anyway, piece by piece, until I didn't even recognize my own reflection. Jack's voice was quiet. You were always more than what they saw. Sophie shook her head. I'm not the girl you remember, Jack. Not anymore. He reached forward, then gently touching her hand. Maybe not. But you're still her underneath all the noise. You're still Sophie. Tears welled in her eyes, not because he said it, but because he meant it. And for the first time in years, she believed maybe she hadn't vanished completely. Maybe, just maybe, she could come back. The stars were sharp above them, scattered across the sky like tiny answers. Jack had built a small fire near the lake's edge. Lily had gone to bed hours ago after insisting Sophie braid her hair. Now only the crackling logs and soft wind remained. Sophie sat wrapped in a blanket, her knees pulled to her chest. Jack handed her a cup of cocoa. Don't laugh. Lily swears it's better with cinnamon. Sophie took a sip. She's right. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just full. Then Sophie said softly, Did you ever hate me for leaving? Jack didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames. I tried. But mostly I just missed you. I wondered if you were happy, if someone made you laugh like you used to. She looked at him, eyes glossy. I never laughed like I did with you. The fire popped, sending sparks upward like fireflies fleeing the weight of the moment. I thought I needed the world, she whispered. Turns out I just needed one place where I was enough. Jack turned toward her. His voice was low, steady. You've always been enough. She didn't cry, but she didn't look away either. They sat there shoulder to shoulder as the fire burned down. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt like they were running. They were just home. The sun filtered through the trees, soft and golden, as morning rose over the quiet cabin. Sophie helped Lily pour cereal into 2 chipped bowls. The little girl was talking about bunnies, pancakes, and how she wanted to build a fort out of blankets and chairs. Suddenly, Lily paused. Spoon in hand, eyes serious. Miss Sophie looked up smiling. Yeah, sweetheart. Lily leaned forward across the table, her voice small but steady. Are you going to leave like Mommy did? The question struck like a bell in Sophie's chest. She blinked fast. I don't know. Lily frowned. I don't want you to go. Daddy smiles different when you're here. Sophie swallowed hard. Do you know what he told me? Lily whispered. He said the bravest people aren't the ones who run. They're the ones who stay. Sophie looked toward the window. Jack was outside chopping wood sleeves, rolled eyes thoughtful. He didn't know they were talking about him, but he was the man who had always stayed for Lily, for her. Sophie reached across the table and gently took Lily's hand. What if I tried? She asked. To stay, Lily beamed as if that was all she needed to hear. Outside, Jack turned, and through the window their eyes met. And Sophie knew this time she wouldn't run. It happened fast. One moment Jack was washing dishes. The next, Sophie was frozen in front of the small TV mounted above the cabin's fireplace. A breaking news banner, aerial footage, a blurry shot of a figure near the lake wrapped in a gray sweater, face tilted to the sun. Her face, who'd just received drone footage believed to show Sophie Delacroix presumed missing for over 2 weeks. Sophie's breath hitched. Jack turned toward her. It's me, she whispered. The screen cut to a panel of talking heads. Speculation, concerned judgment. She's been found. Why did she vanish? Where has she been hiding? Who helped her? Jack muted the TV. The silence was deafening. Sophie clutched the edge of the counter. They know, the world knows. Jack stood beside her. We'll figure it out. She shook her head. I don't want to go back to that life. You don't have to, Jack said gently. But you can't hide forever either. Her hands trembled. What if I'm not strong enough? Jack reached for her hand, steady and warm. Then let me be strong for you, just for a little while. Sophie met his eyes, the janitor who opened the door at 2 a.m., who never asked for anything, who had given her everything. She nodded. And somewhere beyond the fear in the flashing headlines, Sophie Delacroix began to stand on her own. The phone rang just after noon. Jack was in the garden, Lily chasing butterflies nearby. Sophie sat on the porch staring at the lake with a kind of stillness she hadn't known she needed. When she saw the name on the screen, Delacroix Holdings, her stomach twisted. She answered, "Eleanor." It wasn't a question. It was a summons. Her father's voice was as cold and polished as ever. "You've had your moment. The cameras are circling. The stock is unstable. You need to come back and fix this." Sophie didn't speak. "We're arranging a car. A press statement is being drafted. You will read it as written." Her throat tightened. "And if I don't?" There was a pause. Then the ice in his tone sharpened. "You are a Delacroix. You don't get to disappear." She looked out at the lake, at Lily's laughter, at Jack's quiet strength as he glanced up, sensing the change in her. Sophie gripped the phone tighter. "No," she said quietly. "No," her father echoed. "I'm not your pawn," she whispered. "Not anymore." She hung up before she lost her nerve. Her hands shook. Jack came up the steps slowly. "They call?" She nodded. "What now?" Sophie looked at him, a flicker of fire returning to her eyes. "Now," she said, "I decide who I want to be." The bags were light, just one duffel slung over Sophie's shoulder filled with a few clothes, a notebook, and the photo Lily had slipped inside, stick figures of Miss Sophie, Daddy, and me holding hands under a sun. Jack stood beside her at the car. "You sure?" he asked. Sophie nodded. "I have to face it. But I'm not going back to the life they picked for me. I'm going back to take control of it." Jack didn't smile. Not fully. But there was a quiet pride in his eyes. "You're not running this time." She looked up at him, a soft laugh escaping her. "No, I think I ran far enough to finally know who I am." The engine started. Lily hugged Sophie tightly, whispering, "You're still coming back, right?" Sophie knelt, pressing her forehead to Lily's. "I'm not going anywhere. You can't find me." Then she got into the car at his time without security, stylists, or a team of handlers. Just her and her name. As the cabin faded in the rearview mirror, Sophie glanced back one last time, not in regret, but in gratitude. Because sometimes you have to disappear to finally be seen. The press conference was held in the Delacroix Media Tower, all glass steel in silence. Dozens of cameras flashed. A wall of microphones waited. Sophie stepped up to the podium in a simple black blouse. No pearls, no handlers, just her. She took a breath, steadying herself. "I know what the headlines have said, that I vanished, that I was ungrateful, unstable, or overwhelmed." She looked up, voice steady now. "But I didn't run away from my life. I ran toward myself. For the first time." The room hushed. I spent 2 weeks in silence, with no headlines, no suits, no stage. Just a little girl who asked if I wanted pancakes and a father who gave me his couch without asking who I was. She paused, and then her voice softened, her eyes finding the lens that she knew he might be watching through. "To the man who answered the door at 2 a.m., thank you for letting me be no one, so I could remember who I really was." There were no follow-up questions, no applause, just silence. And it was enough. The city was loud again. Jack stood just outside the private garden behind Sophie's restored townhouse, tall hedges, warm lights, and a calm that didn't feel like wealth. It felt like her. She stepped outside barefoot, holding 2 mugs of tea and that familiar, nervous smile. "You came." Jack took the tea. "You didn't give me much choice." A handwritten note folded into a drawing Lily made. Sophie smiled. "Had to go through the real boss." They sat quietly on the garden bench, the sounds of distant traffic softened by ivy and stars. "Jack," she said slowly, "I've been building a fortress my whole life, and all I ever wanted was a home." He looked at her gently. "You've got one now." She nodded. Then with a tremble in her voice, she added, "But it's missing 2 people." Jack didn't speak. "I'm not asking for protection." "I'm not offering it either," she said. I'm asking if maybe we could try being a family. Silence. Then Jack said the simplest, truest thing he could. Lily's already picked out the room she wants. Sophie let out a breath that turned into laughter and then tears. She leaned into him just enough for their shoulders to touch. There were no cameras now, no headlines, no secrets, just a woman who stopped running, and the man who answered the door when she did. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and sunlight. Lily sat at the table swinging her feet, humming as she colored a picture of a house, 3 stick figures, and a dog they didn't have yet. Jack flipped pancakes on the stove, humming along with her. And Sophie was barefoot again, wrapped in Jack's hoodie, sipping coffee by the window. This time she wasn't hiding. She was home. She glanced at the man who used to sweep floors at night and now stood beside her each morning, steady, kind, scarred in the quiet way only the good ones are. "Do you think we missed our chance?" she asked softly. Jack looked up. "No, I think we waited for it to be the right one." Sophie nodded. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer chased her. And Jack's wasn't something he carried alone anymore. Later that afternoon, they took Lily to the park. The city moved around them, fast, loud, unaware. But in their small corner, there was laughter and space to breathe. Sophie took Jack's hand. "Thank you for opening the door." Jack smiled. "Thank you for knocking. Because sometimes the world breaks you. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it brings you right back to the person who knows how to help you heal." The house was quiet. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, and Jack was dreaming of old things, dusty hallways, forgotten voice, until he heard it. Knock, knock. He sat up, heart quickening. Not fear, not this time. He knew that sound, but it wasn't the front door. It was Lily. She stood in her pajamas, sleepy-eyed, tugging at his hand. "Daddy," she whispered. "She's waiting for you." Jack followed her down the hall, bare feet on warm wood, into the kitchen. The light above the stove was on. A small teapot steamed gently on the counter. And Sophie stood there still in his hoodie, still barefoot, still her. But not lost, not afraid, not running, just home. She smiled, holding out a second mug. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Thought maybe you couldn't either." He took the mug. Their fingers brushed. "It's been a year," she whispered, "since I knocked." Jack leaned against the counter beside her, "And you stayed." She looked around at the quiet kitchen, the sleeping child, the calm in her own chest, and nodded. "Yeah, I did." They sipped tea as the clock ticked past 2:01 a.m. Not the beginning, not the end, just the quiet comfort of choosing the same place again and again. And outside, the world went on. But inside, at last, they had found what they were never really looking for: each other.